to our webinar on Quest, taxonomy compliant methodologies for de-risking investments in buildings. We are very happy that you are here. We are happy to present you some preliminary results of a European project funded by the European Commission that is actually supposed to support the implementation of the Green Deal, of the EU Taxonomy, by helping to de-risk investments into sustainability, especially into buildings. My name is Stefan Plesser. I'm coordinator of the Quest project. That's our European project. I'm managing director of synavision, a software company based in Germany. We are working on quality management for buildings, and we are coordinating this project. And I'm very happy that today we can present to you some of our findings and some of the new developments, fast developments, important developments around the Green Deal, the EU Taxonomy. Here you see our agenda for today. My colleagues Sarah Goddard, Alexander Kaae Petersson, and Cormac will guide you through these aspects of the taxonomy issues, especially regarding buildings, and the Quest tool. That is a tool that we are developing that is supposed to support sustainability in buildings and thereby helping to de-risk investments in buildings. I will start with a short introduction into the topic that we are working on in the Quest project. Well, you all know about the Green Deal, the objectives of the EU Taxonomy. We are supposed to turn our economy, our society, whole Europe into a green economy, a green society. This is a huge challenge, and basically we are currently at a stage on the upper left corner with 100%, and we are supposed to go down with our CO2 emissions to somewhere between maybe 10% in 2050. So this is a huge challenge, a huge task, and Europe is mobilizing a lot of ambition, a lot of money to get there. Regarding buildings and investments into buildings, this is basically what we want to do. So for the whole building stock, individual portfolios, single buildings, we have to do investments. We have to take measures to reduce carbon emissions. This can be done by reducing the energy demand in the buildings, by improving the energy efficiency of technical systems, and of course also by covering what is left over with renewable energies. In theory, we can do that. We can invest, we can implement technical measures, but from all we know from the building industry, from how buildings work, how measures turn out to operate actually after they've been implemented, we know that this is not happening right now. Right now, this is what's happening. Usually we go for 40% savings and we achieve 30% savings in reality. So we miss our objectives significantly. And what we know is the further we go down towards zero emissions, the bigger this performance gap actually becomes. So we have a huge problem regarding our technical performance. So there is a technical risk when we look at the renovation wave or the implementation of measures according to the EU taxonomy. Of course, not to act is not an option. If we don't act, we will have a much bigger problem. We have to act, but we have to find measures to actually mitigate this technical risk. Of course, this technical risk also converts into a financial risk. We are going to invest billions of euros into the sustainability of our buildings. We know from empiric data that the magnitude of faults that and the lack of quality that we have is somewhere between 10 and 15% of the whole turnover of the building industry. This is inconceivable for any other industry, but in the building industry, that is the magnitude. That is a catastrophe. And of course, if we now start to invest even more heavily, faster in more buildings with more sophisticated technologies, we are going to waste a lot of money. So there is a big financial risk also in this that we have to address. Now, what is Quest doing to mitigate those risks? Quest is targeting at de-risking investments by establishing quality management services as a key element of the renovation wave. As I said on the last slide, 10 to 15% cost of faults or quality issues is a terrible figure. This is mainly because we do not have a culture of quality in the building industry yet. CO2 emissions so far were just not a big deal. So this has to change. And we have means for doing that. We have good tools and good services, quality management services to do that, to achieve better buildings and to de-risk investments. Quest is looking at those services, at those tools. The most important ones we have mentioned right here, that is technical monitoring, basically specifying digitally how buildings or systems are supposed to operate, then taking data from building management systems and check whether they are actually performing as intended. On a larger scale, commissioning management that looks in a broader scale on how buildings are actually being designed, built, and operated. And on the largest scale, actually green building certification schemes like DGNB, HQE, LEED, BREEAM, etc., that look at the whole scope of sustainability in buildings. Those services are there, they exist, they are partially implemented, but they have not yet become standard in the building industry. We consider them as essential for de-risking those huge investments we intend to take. We have a couple of key requirements for them. They are all, by definition, third-party services. That is important. We consider certification as a key element to make those services contractable. On a large scale, we need to be able to implement those services into contracts. And of course, we need reliable empiric data on the impact of quality management services. This is what Quest is supposed to do. So on the one hand, the Quest project is providing more empiric evidence of the benefits and impact of those quality management services. And on the other hand, we are providing a tool that is going to be presented by Cormac at the end of the presentation that helps developers, investors to budget quality management service in an early stage of any project, to have it in there and to make it part of any investment or project, because it's such an important element of any investment into sustainability. That's what we're doing in Quest. We are very happy that you're here. And I would now like to hand over to my colleague, Sarah Goddard from AMICE, because she's representing owners of buildings. And of course, they play a key role. And for them, this question of what is actually sustainable is essential. And Sarah, I hand over the presentation, the screen to you to give us your insights.
Hello, Stefan. Thank you very much for inviting me to address today, and thank you everybody very much for attending. I hope you do find this to be a useful seminar. And also, I think that what will be useful for me is to give you a little bit of a background as to what and who we are. Is that sharing okay at the moment, Stefan?
No, it's the wrong screen. I think you're presenting the other screen.
Okay, let me see if I can find the right screen to present. Okay, it's not giving me the option as to which screen to present at the moment. Right. Is that still showing?
Yeah. But
Is
we
it
can
showing
just
the
do the other
correct
way.
screen now?
I can
Okay.
present. No?
If
I
you
can
could,
present
that
it.
would be good.
Okay,
Thank
no problem.
you. My apologies. Yeah, this is it's. I haven't used a GoToWebinar like this before, so my apologies. I thought, first of all, that for the benefit of those of you who are not familiar with AMICE, or in fact with the mutual and cooperative insurance sector, I'd give you a brief overview of what and who we are, and specifically what AMICE represents. So with regard to the European insurance market, data shows that the mutual and cooperative insurers are responsible for about a third of all insurance transactions in Europe. The last figures that we have is that they have in excess of 3 trillion euro in assets. So these are for investment for the benefit of their companies. Now, what makes us mutual and cooperative insurers different from the listed insurers is that they are in general owned by their member policyholders. This means that there are no external stakeholders in the model. There are no third-party investors. So any profits and any benefits emanating from the conduct of the business of the insurer, if it's a mutual or cooperative, are focused onto the policyholder and onto the organization, rather than being distributed to an external investor community. You'll see from this, if you think about it, that therefore really at the heart of the model of the mutual and cooperative insurer is a long-term relationship. That relationship with the policyholder, whether the policyholder be buying a one-year policy or whether it be a long-term policy. This means that the foundation of their business is the concept of sustainability. Sustainability has been very, very strongly embedded into the structure of the organizations and very much into their actions. And as I explained, they are very powerful investors with these 3 trillion of assets under management. That represents 3 times the amount that the European Commission is proposing in total will be put to the sustainability agenda. So you can see the power that is within the arms of the mutual and cooperative insurance community as investors. Now, it's also worth bearing in mind that these were the types of insurers that were very early adopters of what were called clean or green investment policies. We've seen decarbonizing within their investment policies for a number of them. And in fact, one of the challenges that a number of our members have had is that at the moment, there aren't enough policy or investments available that would come under their definition of sustainable or green for them to be able to enter into. There is not enough available. Now, insurers are also large investors in the property market, so quality in buildings is that it has great importance for them, and therefore the concept of de-risking is of paramount importance. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Stefan. Thank you. So I wanted to give a little brief overview on what this sustainable financial strategy is, why it's here, and why the taxonomy as an element of that is so important. So we can see that the focus is very much on a long-term business model rather than the short-term financial performance. And this is where it is very much reflecting the structure and the ethos of the mutual and cooperative insurance community. The increasing opportunities for citizens, financial institutions and companies to enhance sustainability is already there. What we also have within our model is a democratic governance. Therefore, the members, the policyholders, make decisions about various aspects of the management, and there is a very strong commitment to this long-term agenda, and therefore to fitting in with this strategy itself. And that ethos extends into the mitigation of climate and environmental risks. We're also involved in other projects alongside our members, for example, looking at de-risking elements of catastrophe risk for communities that are living in flood areas, for example. So there is an active engagement in being involved in those top level areas that have been defined as what the strategy is about. If we could move on, please, Stefan, that would be great. Thank you. So under this, there are three main areas of reform under the European Commission Action Plan. You can see them there. The capital flows towards sustainable investment for this growth is one which is paramount in the whole status of it. And you can see the first part of that from this slide. You will see that it is actually establishing the taxonomy. As you can imagine, as you probably experienced, this is not simple. We as an organization are involved in the consultations and in the last few weeks have made submissions under various aspects such as Article 8. Now this is technical from the investors side, so I won't send you to an early afternoon nap by going into detail about it, but I think that we can show from this that it is something that our members see as being one of the most important areas of activity that we will be undertaking on their behalf, engaging with the European authorities, the Commission at this point in time, over the next few years. So this is one of our top activities as an association for 2021. It has been for 2020 as well, but we see this as something which is ongoing and which will have its own long-term effects. In fact, if you look at the paper that was issued by the regulatory oversight authority, EIOPA, in the middle of last year, they make it very clear in that paper that the taxonomy is an area which will be an organic growth and undergoing organic change over the period of its lifetime, and that lifetime could be very, very long. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give a bit of a background again, to put the taxonomy into the context of how this has been developing, how this the actions at European level have been developing. We saw the Sustainable Finance Action Plan published 3 years ago this month, and that looked at the objectives and the key actions that would bring a movement of capital investment towards the sustainable agenda. The EU Green Deal, which is just over a year old now, then looked at decoupling that economic growth from natural resources and creating resource efficiency. And we now have since last year, the renewed sustainable finance strategy. That part is looking very much into the commitments of a climate neutrality as part of it, and we also have the sustainable investment plan that comes under the Capital Markets Union, which again is one of the biggest initiatives on the European Commission's agenda. If we could move on, please. Thank you. In fact, whilst we're talking about the agenda, it's worth probably reflecting on some comments that were made by the Commissioner for Financial Services, Mairead McGuinness, who was just talking yesterday at an event about what they see as being the important primary objectives for the Commission, and particularly within this agenda. So if we bear in mind that the taxonomy is there to enable organizations to actually identify which are going to be these sustainable investments, that they can make the right decisions along their own investment strategy, and be able to judge those against performance criteria to ensure that they're actually hitting their own objectives. It's something, though, that has been taking quite some time to develop, I think, because this is, at this point in time, Europe is really seen as leading the global agenda on pushing sustainability forward. The sustainability agenda, obviously, at a global level, has is going to see the next COP iteration coming very soon, but Europe is increasingly playing a guiding hand in the direction these are going. But Commissioner McGuinness's view, and I quote from her yesterday, is that taxonomy is a guide to dramatic change. She reflected that the non-financial reporting requirements currently are not effective, and said very straightforwardly that the Commission is working flat out on the delegated acts at the moment, so that will permit them to have the infrastructure in place as soon as possible. She actually likened the race to sustainability as, rather than being a short sprint, it's going to be a marathon, but a marathon at speed. And this is the challenge, essentially, for the financial services sector to engage with that. One reflection she made, which I think is worth sharing with you today, is that the money does need to flow to the right places, and that if it doesn't, there's a generation, the young, who will never forgive us for not actually doing what we know we need to do. And that sustainability agenda itself is always affected by the developments in the taxonomy, so that the goals are actually not just achievable but are achieved. So if we could move on again, please, Stefan. So where are we in AMICE on all this? Well, we obviously support the objectives, that we will have a more resilient economic environment with the Green Deal and the CMU action plan in place. The last year has brought an increasing focus on sustainability. And in many different environments, we have heard the view that the pandemic has proven that sustainability has to be at the core of all actions in the future. Moreover, as I hope that I've been able to display to you, the objectives of this economic resilience through a sustainable and green agenda reflect already what is in the notion and the ethos of the mutual and cooperative insurance community. Again, I repeat that we do have a problem at times, in fact, that our members cannot find enough to invest in within their criteria, some of which can be extremely strict, of what is a green investment. If we could move to the next slide, please, Steph. Thank you. And that is where Quest comes in for us. We do believe that at the moment there isn't sufficient ability to properly identify what is truly a green credential. In the earlier days of this project, there was a lot of concern about finding ways of being able to prevent greenwashing. And Quest is a tool that not only will help us identify where greenwashing is taking place, but actually be able to essentially desud that. So perhaps where it appears to be greenwashing, the tool itself can genuinely convert an investment, a property, into something that is green, or give the opportunity to do so. This then feeds into the increased profile of the sustainable investment agenda, the sustainable investment strategy. And the important part of it is that we see Quest as being one of the significant tools and a leader in the quest itself of closing the gap between the appetite for sustainable investments and the availability of those investments to not just our members, but the wider investment community. Okay, thank you very much for your time. I hope this has given you an insight into why Quest is important for us, the background to why the taxonomy has a central part in the financial services industry and in their future strategy. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them later in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think it's fantastic to see how the, well, I would call it the financial community is picking up on the issue of sustainability, and it's important to see how the community is identifying the challenges that we are facing here. I forgot to mention to all participants, you have an option to write down questions in the menu. So if you have questions, please just enter those questions to the presenters. I will pick them up and ask those questions in the panel at the end of our presentation. So Sarah, thank you very much for this introduction in the perspective of, well, let's say the building owner. Now I would like to hand over to my colleague Alexander Petersson. He's a research engineer at Sweco, and he will give us a little more detail about what the EU taxonomy actually is. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Well, yes, my name is Alexander Petersson, and I'm working at Sweco Facility Management, and I'm going to try to touch a little bit on the taxonomy in building projects and why using quality management system is important. No, it actually, here we go. But before I'm moving on, I just want to touch a little bit on what the taxonomy is and the scale of it for those of you who's not familiar with it yet. The taxonomy is categorizing and identifying what green investments and green activities are. It's set out by the European Union, and they identified 6 main categories of issues we need to work on to be green in the European Union. And the first 2 parts, which are under the first part of the taxonomy, is climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. The last 4 categories they are working on as we speak to roll out the different measurements in those 4 categories as well. It's set out, so if you want to be a green taxonomy green, then your activity or financial activity needs to substantially contribute to one of these 6 categories to the right. But at the same time, you need to prove that you do not significantly harm the other 5 in the process. So it's the combination of how these issues work together on your specific project or your investment. And this will make it a benchmarking tool and actually help us all define what is green, what is taxonomy European green, and in your investments and your projects. And The taxonomy at the beginning is going to target market and financial participants, primarily financial institutes and in equity firms, but also large companies who are already required to report under the non-financial statement reporting directive, and but also large interest companies. And I think we have around 12,000 of those in the European Union at the moment, and the largest of those will also be affected by the taxonomy. They have set out to work with the 7 main sectors under the taxonomy, as you can see here, because they are producing over 90% of all greenhouse emissions. So it's all the financial market players, and it's governments, and it's municipalities, it's everybody more or less that is going to be affected by this. So the sheer scale of it is massive. So that's just to give you a little introduction to the sheer scale of the ambition of the taxonomy. So the taxonomy, in short, in building projects and in ownership, and why quality management services are important. On one of the previous slides, we had 7 large sectors which are going to be affected. And within that, they have identified 9 main kind of activities. And under all of these 9, you have a lot of different subcategories. And they are going to be submitted to what's called screening criteria, which are the threshold values of not significantly harming each other, or what it needs to achieve to be green. And as you can see, number 7 and number 9 is going to be the main drivers of the building industry as a whole. Within construction and property management, you have sort of a hierarchy. Which means you can have single activities such as installing solar panels. It could be parking spaces for electrical cars. It could be a lot of different IoTs which help you be more energy efficient. If you invest in those single activities, you can put it into your yearly reporting as a green activity, and your CAPEX will go towards that. But on the larger part, then you have large-scale renovation and, of course, new constructions. The main goals here are to lessen by 30% the energy performance certificate when you're doing large renovations. While achieving that, you still need to not significantly harm the other 5 macros. And then you have new constructions. At the moment, the recommendation to the Commission is it needs to be 20% less than nearly net zero. And this value is actually set out on a national level, so this can vary. And as we speak, these are getting voted on, so this is not set in stone. These are the recommendations to the Commission from the expert group. When you have done your renovations, your new constructions, and you can report all your CAPEX towards green investments, then your property is going to fall under another category. And that category is ownership and acquisition when you're doing transactions. And here you will have 2 different values you need to achieve, and that's before and after 2021. And if you are looking at the constructions before all our existing property mass in Europe, then at the level now it should be performing at or be an energy performance certificate A to have a green ownership, and after 2020 it should be meeting the threshold for the new constructions, depending on what country you are in and what's getting voted on. But there's somewhat of a catch, actually, because if you are an owner of large real estate, and as it's set out now, it's it's property over 5,000 square meters, and you have a lot of technical components in them, such as air conditioning, ventilation, space heating, then it actually needs to be efficiently operated. So it's not just enough to design a building anymore and just let it run itself, more or less. You can maybe hand over your expenses on not being operated efficiently to the tenants. This actually kind of forces the ownership to be in the driver's seat of their investments and how they operate, because otherwise it won't be in the category of a green ownership. So this is actually kind of a game changer. There's a lot of different areas in the building process and in the ownership, and it will be tough to get going. But actually, under activity 9.2, there's a lot of professional consultancy and services which will actually be available to put in your reporting as being green, as long as it contributes to your journey to achieve the taxonomy alignment. Then you will actually be able to put it as a green capital investment. So what should you do? At the moment, if you haven't done it, you should get a real screening of your portfolio, how it performs, what it is designed to actually get a feeling of how it's working. You can, if it's not efficiently enough in your operatings, you should update your monitoring systems, maybe put in some more. These two activities can you put towards your green investments. And when you're looking into new projects, looking into new construction, big renovation projects, put in a little bit of money into quality management services, because you really need to have a focus on your operations when the building is done and when you go into operations. Then you really need to be able to do it efficiently. So spend a little bit of time actually making sure that your projects will be able to perform when you're actually executing them. Because what it's about is actually closing the performance gap, right? So if you're not really using the correct quality management tools or monitoring, and you're not designing your buildings correctly and checking it, then you will, all study shows, have a performance gap of up to 30%. But with the correct quality management, then you can actually close that performance gap. And I would argue that if you have a building performing, just a newly constructed building, and it's not performing as designed, it will be hard to find your property in the category of green ownership, because it's not performing efficiently, and you haven't really done anything for it to perform efficiently. So by applying, for instance, Quest to identify the right quality management tool, you are now in the driver's seat of getting a green property. This is not something which is going to be in 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years. This is actually now. The full-scale taxonomy 1.0 should be in effect in just over 1.5 years. So if you really haven't thought about it on how it's going to affect you, well, I think it's about time that you actually put a little bit of thought into it. So you need to get started if you need to be aligned or starting to get aligned and have a plan in 18 months. And remember, the screening and the consultancy you can do upfront by using a tool as Quest is actually a taxonomy green activity, where you need to upgrade your buildings, putting new monitoring systems, whatever you need to do to achieve it is a green taxonomy activity. These these ways of monitoring and controlling your portfolios and your operations and your building process will help you to get a green taxonomy portfolio. And you shouldn't despair because of certain areas of your portfolio, because you need to report on the whole portfolio. So it's not 100% or 0%. you can have 30% of an investment portfolio which is taxonomy aligned and 70% which is not. So this is one of the things you can report on. So have a little bit of optimism when you go through your portfolio and see how far you can get. Because if you have a 30% of your portfolio which is taxonomy green in your ownership, but it actually gives you 40% of your turnover, then you can also put in 40% of your revenue stream is taxonomy green. And it all starts with you putting yourself in your driver's seat and actually operating and managing your buildings and your properties and your operations. Thank you.
Alexander, thank you very much for those insights into the taxonomy. I think this is a really impressive document. It's really interesting to see that this is not the far future. This is really starting now, and we are experiencing this actually in the Quest project, that there is interest, a lot of interest from different stakeholders into this issue, and all the stakeholders are feeling that it's coming, and it's coming fast. So it's really important to make yourself familiar with the details of taxonomy, and to identify the options that you have to to implement the measures that are necessary to turn your buildings green. And how this can be done will be presented by our next speaker. Our next speaker is my colleague Cormac from COPILOT Building Certification. And he's going to present you the Quest tool that on the one hand actually collects empiric data, but on the other hand is going to be probably the starting point for investment into quality management. Cormac, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Stefan, will you present the slides maybe?
Okay, yes, sure. Okay, I can do that.
Great. If we can go to the first one.
Yeah, sure.
So,
second.
I will start just by recapping Quest's mission, which really is to de-risk real estate investments and to predict the added value generated by different quality solutions for building projects. On the next slide, please, Stefan. Yeah, I'm going to present now Quest tool, which calculates the value add for a specific building project. Quest's value add calculation is based on data input by users, by financial stakeholders. I'll take you through the tool step by step, starting with the next slide. The next one, please. Yeah. So the first part we look at is to do the calculation. We say that we're going to want to look at what the user knows. We ask the user to input values per square meter. If they prefer to input values for a building project, that is fine as well. It's only important that they use the same base each time, whether it's per square meter, per square foot for the building project. They input OPEX, operating expenditure, and income data. The Quest tool will apply algorithms to predict potential OPEX and income savings based on technical risks. The user indicates their investment time horizon, for example, 10 years, and Quest will capitalize the savings, the OPEX savings, the income savings, to create a predicted value. Quest tool proposes default values in case the user does not know which input data he wants to put in. The default values are based on indicative building project costs in leading European cities. For example, a building market value of €10,000 per square meter. A rental yield of 5%. As we improve the tool, we hope to reduce the number of data variables. There are currently 6, but we'd like to consolidate them. For example, the OPEX we split into energy cost and operation and maintenance cost, but maybe a more global OPEX indicator might be easier. Next slide, please. The other part are the one-off costs in a building project. So in this case, we've asked the user to put the overall build cost of their project. If it's a new build or a renovation project, the overall build cost. We will not capitalize it as it's a one-off. We will use research-based data to apply algorithms and calculate potential saving based on risk again. The next slide. So here we're looking at risk. We ask the user to indicate how they perceive the technical risk of the project, not the commercial risk, the technical risk. We give them low, medium, or high as options. In the current version of the tool, we ask for the risk perception for different elements of the project, for example, for the energy cost or for the occupancy, if the tenants will have downtime or not. We hope to simplify this in the future by consolidating the risks into one single risk. As a default, if the user feels unsure of what risk to apply, we would propose mid-level risk. And in future developments, we hope to propose a default risk levels according to building type and user confidence in the technical teams managing the project. Next, please. When we discuss risk, we have to have some kind of way of evaluating that. And here we look at the quality management services, which can be a verification of how risk is being controlled. Quest cannot magically evaluate return on investment unless there is standardized quality controls that are similar from project to project. Therefore, we use certified quality management services to ensure standardized approach. Example of these services Stefan mentioned earlier, it could be labels like LEED or BREEAM that look at sustainability. It could be certification of commissioning, that's verification of design, build, and operation according to owner specs, like as COPILOT does, or for an existing building in use. It could be certification of technical monitoring to see how systems are working. That's another service certified by COPILOT, for example. On the next slide, we see that once all I've just already discussed has been done, there has to be let's say a amalgamation as the algorithms in the Quest tool come into work. So what the tool will do then is it applies research-based statistics to potential operational savings. It risk weighs those savings according to the user's risk perception, low, medium, high risk. It capitalizes the annual savings, and then it adds on the one-off savings from the CapEx, the actual project design and build part. On the next slide, please, Stefan. What the Quest tool will predict is the value add to building projects and buildings of the use of standardized quality management services with a certificate attached. The data that will be output is a euro saving per meter squared or per building project. For example, if you just input your data globally for the whole project, a percentage saving compared to the market value of the building, and a return on investment of the investment in quality management services. Next slide, please. The tool will improve the more we use it. we're applying it at the moment on projects, and over time it'll be applied on more and more projects. This will allow us to combine research-based algorithms with real-life findings. And when the EU Taxonomy technical criteria are published shortly, as Alexander mentioned, we aim to integrate them into the Quest tool and then to answer two key questions for financial stakeholders. One, what value can you generate by applying quality management services to your projects? And two, will your investment be considered green? Not just greenwashing, but really green, to avoid the risk of stranded assets devaluing your portfolio. And when we recall what Sarah mentioned, that there is a shortage of verifiable green assets, there's lots of money chasing few assets, you will understand how important it will become to prove that your investment makes the grade. Financial stakeholders will need to maximize their green assets to optimize their credit rating. And the tool itself, we can see, if possible, Stefan, to have a look at what the tool looks like in real life. So this is the tool on, the real version. On the left-hand side, there is where the user inputs data. On each case, there is a default value provided, representative of a big European city. They might be too high for secondary cities, for example. And according to the data put into the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, there will be different outputs. And that's available to play with and to review on the Quest website, the address of which is at the end of the presentation, and I think we'll see on the last slide as well, that address. So I will pass you to Stefan, who will continue the presentation. Thank you.
Cormac, thank you very much. What you have just seen is what we're producing in Quest, sort of the outcome of the first phase of this project. As simple as this tool looks on first sight, maybe, the important it is extremely important for the building process that the decision for applying quality management processes is happening very early in a project, during the development, very, very early design phases, when the budgets are defined. Of course, there's very few information on the building, so we try to keep the data input required as small and limited as possible to generate the information, but it's extremely important to sort of find the slot for quality management to be implemented in projects in this early stage, because later on it will be very difficult to edit when sort of the pain is coming, the quality issues are popping up, then it is usually too late to implement them regarding contracts, regarding budgets, and even technically it might be too late to implement them effectively or with the same impact as they could have. So we think this is really important. And of course, this is just the one side of the project. The other side is the continuous gathering of data on the quality of measures that we have in buildings and the difference that quality management services make. To conclude, I think the aspect of quality management is absolutely essential. We know from research since decades that we have a problem in actually delivering what technology can do in buildings, what buildings can, how buildings can perform. But so far, it just did not really matter. Energy was cheap, CO2 was not having a price, that did not have a price. so it just was not such a big issue. This is changing. This is changing now. And as Alexander said, there's no greenwashing anymore. There is going to be a meter, let's call it a CO2 meter, on every single building in the future. And you cannot bypass that CO2 meter. So we will be talking about the real operation, the real emissions. And that is important. And so there's no bypassing performance anymore. You need to deliver. And this is going to change the market. This is going to change the building industry strongly. So it's a very important issue. When you're in the building industry, whatever part, this is going to affect your daily work. We would be very happy